Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Sheila Segerson, Director of Shelter Solutions at Maddie's Fund. Welcome to Maddie's Monthly Behavior Connection, a monthly webcast where we learn about topics of interest to those of us who are interested in animal behavior, providing support to keep pets in homes, or supporting pets while in shelter or foster care. Our guest today is Dr. Mikel Delgado. Dr. Mikel Maria Delgado is a certified applied animal behaviorist and certified cat behavior consultant who has been working with cats professionally for over 20 years. She worked as a cat behavior specialist at the San Francisco SPCA for 8 years before co-founding Feline Minds, where she offers assistance for cat owners, animal shelters, and corporations. Mikel completed her PhD in animal behavior and cognition at UC Berkeley and was a postdoc at the UC Davis School of Vet Med, where she researched the social and feeding behavior of cats and the health and behavior of orphan kittens. So lots and lots of interesting work. She's also the author of the book Play with Your Cat and co-authored the 2017 book Total Cat Mojo with Jackson Galaxy. Apologies. Mikel lives in Sacramento, California with her boyfriend and their 3 cats, Ruby, Coriander, and Professor Scribbles. Love that name. Today, Dr. Delgado will be talking to us about play aggression in cats. Welcome, Dr. Delgado. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sheila, and thank you everybody for being here. Give me just a second while I go through the technical challenge that is always sharing your PowerPoint in Zoom. So hopefully it will go smoothly, but you never know. Okay, hopefully we are good.
All right, that looks great.
Great. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about play aggression in cats. And with some of my own personal experiences, this is my cat Coriander. We'll see some videos of her because I have been dealing with her play aggressive behavior myself. And I'm also going to make an argument for why play aggression, although it's an easy label, I think people kind of understand it, and sometimes we're trying to use language that cat owners can understand easily. It's not the best label for behavior. I'm not a fan of the term aggression. So just to give you an overview, first I'm going to talk about, and for someone who doesn't like the word aggression, you'll see it's in my PowerPoint a lot. I'm really trying to rethink how I'm framing these terms for future approaches, but I'm going to talk about feline aggression in general, and then I'm going to define play aggression specifically. I'm going to talk briefly about why cats play and the importance of play for them, and then I'll dive into some of the risk factors that we see are related to play aggression, how to assess it, and then behavior modification for it. And this is primarily about cats in home environments, but I know this is a shelter audience, so certainly if you have questions specific to the shelter environment, I'm happy to answer them at the end of my talk. All right, so let's get started by talking about aggression. So when I was starting this talk, aggression is a term I think about a lot because people often contact me for help and they'll say, my cat is aggressive, my cat is attacking me. And of course, that tells me almost nothing about what is actually going on with their cat. So I started by looking at some of the kind of foundational behavior books. Some are older, some are newer, but really seeing like, how did they define aggression? And so these are some of the definitions that I found, which is threatening or harmful behavior directed toward another individual, posturing, vocalizing, stalking, scratching, biting, or related behaviors. So that's a much more specific definition than the first one because it's really outlining specific actions that the animal is doing. Definition 3, body postures and displays related to flight, defensive, or offensive attack. And now we're getting more into the function or the motivation for the behavior, which is one of the things about when we're talking about aggression is that we can classify it by the target. So who is this behavior directed towards? And also its function. So what is the purpose of this behavior? Is it to make something go away? Is it to inspect something? Is it to take over a resource? So let's talk about what we're actually talking about, right? Which is cats biting and scratching. So again, a lot of my clients will say, oh, my cat's attacking me. And so I'm always like, what is the cat actually doing? Because sometimes the cat is not actually even touching or making contact with the person, which is a very different scenario than when a cat is biting and scratching. We typically see these behaviors in cats in response to a negative emotion, pain, fear, frustration, anxiety. And the purpose or function of biting and scratching in this context is typically what has been labeled repulsion. And if you haven't read Sarah Heath's article about understanding feline emotions and their role in problem behaviors, it's in an open access journal, the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery. I highly recommend it. Her framework for looking at these behaviors, so she uses the term repulsion instead of aggression, is really about the emotions of cats as motivational influences that are also neurological. And this is based on some of Dr. Jaak Panksepp's work in affective neuroscience, which is really that there are these neural circuits that control emotions. And in animals, when we talk about emotions, we're not talking about that kind of subjective state that we use words to describe for humans, but really about the internal motivation of the animal, which is usually about survival things such as lust or reproduction, exploration of the environment, rage or fear, panic, pain, grief, etc. So with these behaviors where cats are biting and scratching, what we typically see is that the cat is trying to increase the distance or decrease interaction between themselves and whatever they're showing this behavior towards. So those of you in shelter land know if you're interacting with a cat who's very fearful in the shelter, they often are trying to increase distance with people, often by hissing, sometimes by doing things like swatting or scratching or biting. So we do see active responses. And we also know that repulsion does not have to be done just by biting or scratching. It could be more passive. We see this more in between cats in homes where there's a lot of staring or blocking access to resources. So there's kind of a spectrum of these responses that we would consider repulsive, not in the gross form, like I think you're repulsive, but in the I'm trying to make you go away and repel you away from me. Okay. So some things to think about, and again, this is kind of where I start thinking about the language I'm using and whether it's useful, is that aggression can be a perfectly normal response to a stimulus, to an emotion, to something in the environment. And so it's maybe a problem for the humans, right? But it is a perfectly normal behavior, part of the behavioral repertoire, and often a normal response to something in the environment. Aggression is not a diagnosis, and it's usually not a helpful term. And I kind of hinted at this earlier when clients call me and say, oh, my cat's aggressive, he's attacking me. That again does not tell me anything about the context, the reasons that the cat is engaging in these behaviors, or what to do about them. I just know that the person is basically disturbed by their cat's behavior. So I also don't want to downplay the importance of addressing these aggressive behaviors, for lack of a better term, because we know claws and teeth are very sharp. We know people can be injured by their cats and end up even hospitalized if their injury is serious enough. And people do not typically enjoy biting and scratching from their cat. There's the rare person who might, but typically this is not a behavior that people enjoy. And of course, if the behavior is directed towards humans, sometimes it's one person in the home who has a problem with it while another person does not. And of course, if the aggression is directed towards other pets in the home, that often causes a lot of conflict for the humans in the home. So it's really impactful on a lot of people, whether the cat is biting and scratching them or biting and scratching or chasing other animals in the home. So let's talk about play aggression specifically. Now, this is a little bit different from these previous behaviors I was just highlighting, which are about repulsion, right? These negative emotions. In this case, we see a lot of chasing, pouncing, biting, scratching, kicking. So some of the same behaviors that overlap with maybe those more defensive behaviors. We also see stalking, where the cat is kind of waiting around a corner for someone to walk by and then they'll ambush them. And the target is often a moving stimulus. So human hands and feet are common targets. Other pets are common targets. I've seen eyelashes, like people moving their hands while they're talking on the phone, their hair. These are all kind of fair game for a cat who is showing these behaviors. And it can be directed towards one individual in the home, or sometimes it's kind of more free form. Anybody is fair game for this cat. So I would say personally, I would prefer to call this misdirected predatory behavior, because that's really what we're talking about. I just think that that terminology is not as easy for people to understand. I'm always like, I love talking about this stuff with people. So if you have thoughts about the language that we use when we're describing these behaviors, please feel free to leave comments, because I'm always looking, how can I communicate more clearly? I just think that one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is how important the role of predatory behavior is in their cat's daily life. So sometimes they're actually not even, it doesn't even occur to them that their cat is biting and scratching them in a playful slash predatory way. But what we see is clear elements of the predatory sequence. So again, the stalking, the butt wiggling, the ambushing, and then the biting and scratching, which would be part of the hunting sequence as well. Now, what is different between this and other forms of aggression that I previously alluded to is that this is typically motivated by what we would consider positive emotions, again, referring back to Dr. Pongsep's framework for animal emotions, which is that in this case, the cat is motivated by desire seeking and social play. And desire seeking is really about that motivation that animals have to find necessary resources to survive. And in this case, again, although we don't often make the connection between food and play, and hunting, they are interconnected. And then, of course, we also see cats that are highly motivated to engage in social play with other individuals, whether they're the same species, but this allows animals to learn about how they interact with others, like practicing for fighting and also practicing for social interactions that they might engage in the future. So how do cats hunt? And so not everybody thinks about their cats as hunters because many of us keep our cats indoors, and unless a fly comes into your house or a moth, there's not a lot of opportunity for our cats to engage in hunting of actual prey. We do know that compared to other species, cats are what we call stalk and rush hunters or stalk and ambush hunters, meaning that they spend quite a lot of time after they've been basically triggered to recognize that there is prey in the environment. So this can be by auditory signals like rustling leaves or the movement of a prey animal. They're going to go into hunting mode, or they might go to places where they've had success hunting in the past. So this might be near a bird feeder or near mouse burrows. So they're going into areas where there's a high probability of encountering prey. And then there's a lot of waiting. So they're either waiting for the prey to come out or show up, or just the right opportunity to make that kind of last minute ambush jump where they're going to actually attempt to kill the prey. We do know that cats learn about hunting from mom, but there's kind of this misnomer that if a cat doesn't learn to hunt from mom, that they will never be a competent hunter. And the evidence does not hold that to be true. So there have been a lot of studies of early hunting and play behavior in kittens. A lot of this research was done in the early 80s, late 70s. And what it found was that hunting is so important to cats that they will learn how to hunt even if mom's not around. So there is no evidence that kittens need mom to show them how to hunt. What they do have as an advantage is if mom shows them how to hunt, they get better faster. And some of that may be just because they're getting more experience, because experience is actually the best way for kittens to become competent hunters, is to just practice. Another thing that people often don't think about is that all of the cat's senses are really tuned into hunting. They have evolved, despite our domestication attempts, we have not really changed their hunting behavior at all. So their sense of hearing, their vision, their sense of touch, the air movements they can detect through their whiskers that they have on their face and the back of their paws, the nerve endings in their claws, nerve endings in their teeth. These are all allowing them to become very competent hunters and to respond to stimuli in the environment that suggest opportunities to hunt. So a lot of cats are going to be very opportunistic. If something is moving in their environment, they're going to assume it could be prey. I should chase it. And so this is where we can see that in a home environment where if a cat does not have other opportunities to engage in either predatory or pseudo-predatory slash play behaviors, that anything that moves may become a temptation, or it's not even a temptation, it's just an instinct to chase that. And that is because, again, their bodies are just programmed. They can hear sounds way above our range of hearing, so they can eavesdrop on rodent and bird sounds. They can see things in low light conditions that we can't really pay attention to. They can feel things. They can feel movement with their whiskers. They can feel movement of the air, etc. And all of these things allow them to be competent hunters. We are so visual that we are more thinking, especially when it comes to play, right? Like we want toys that are like, look like a strawberry or a piece of pizza. Well, your cat cannot detect red the way that we do. So that toy strawberry does not look very exciting to your cat. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to play with cats, but we have a very different kind of experience when it comes to what we think cats see versus what they experience, which is not just visual. Okay, sorry, I kind of got on a little tangent there, but when we see cats play, well, their play looks very much like hunting. So they're stalk and ambush players, just like they're stalk and ambush hunters. And we see that play is triggered by specific stimuli, including the size of the toy and the similarity of the toy to actual prey. So just like their senses are tuned into hunting, their senses are very much tuned into play. And that is partly because play and predation are just parts of the same spectrum of behaviors. You may have heard of cats being cruel or torturing their prey because they play with their prey. And there's been some research on predatory play in cats. And what's interesting is that what we interpret as playful, so a lot of the behaviors, if you've seen a cat interact with their prey while they're killing it, they're, kind of tossing it. There's a lot of like head bobbing and kind of tentative batting. All of these behaviors are actually designed to protect the cat. So much like a boxer does a lot of bobbing and weaving to protect themselves from getting hit, a lot of the things that cats are doing during predation are just assessing the safety of further interaction with this prey animal. So if I move this mouse, can I turn their head away from me so they don't bite me? Can I move my head back so that rat doesn't bite me? So a lot of prey animals, especially larger like rats, larger rodents, can be quite dangerous to cats. They can injure them. So it's not like killing is this done deal for cats. It's a little bit of a struggle at times. But what we see is that these behaviors that look playful to us are part of the predation spectrum, and a lot of it is them testing whether or not this prey is worth investing in the hunt and whether or not it's safe to do so. And we see that these two behaviors, play and hunting, share mechanisms. They share influences. So they're both influenced by hunger and by qualities of the prey / toy. I'm going to talk about a few research studies that have demonstrated this. So the first study was by Sarah Hall and John Bradshaw. And if you're not familiar with John Bradshaw's work, I highly recommend reading his books. He's got a book called Cat Sense, and he also has a more scientific, maybe slightly drier, but in-depth review of much of the scientific literature about cats called The Behavior of the Domestic Cat. So in this study, so it's already been established, and I don't have time to go into every study, but I talk about a lot of these papers in my book and also in a review paper I did with Julie Hecht. Basically, when cats are hungry, they are more likely to interact with larger prey. And the same is true with play. So in this study, they had some cats who had not been fed for almost a day, so 16 hours, and some cats who had just been fed. So if we look here on the x-axis, we have time since last meal. We have 0 hours or 16 hours. So the cats who ate 16 hours ago are presumably quite hungry, whereas the cats who just ate are not very hungry. And these bars represent the size of a toy. It was just a small furry toy or a larger furry toy. So the small toy is represented by the black bars, and the larger toy is represented by the white bars. And on the y-axis, we have the behaviors that they were measuring. They were measuring how often the cat sniffed the toy and then how often they actually bit the toy. Sniffing is considered exploratory and showing some interest in the toy, and biting or kill biting is showing more of a commitment to actually killing the toy. And what we see is that when the cat is not very hungry, they're kind of sniffing both the small and large toy equally. When they are not hungry, they're more likely to bite the smaller toy than the larger toy. Now, when the cat is very hungry, they are more likely to sniff the larger toy, but they're much more likely to bite the smaller toy. So that suggests that even when they're very hungry, they're still much more comfortable attacking the smaller mouse versus the larger rat, right? So this is very much parallel with the data looking at small rodents versus large rodents. So when cats are hunting, they show very similar behavior. So again, this is just providing evidence that these two behaviors, play and predation, are basically the same thing. It's just what they're directed toward, and they're motivated by some of the same influences. I love this other study, which was also by Sarah Hall and John Bradshaw, because this is something that comes up a lot with people who have cats, people who are working with cats, is the effect of habituation. And habituation is just the process of not responding as much to a stimulus when it's been presented to you repeatedly. So this is Just like if you live near train tracks, when you first move in, you're like, wow, this train is driving me crazy. It's like going off, it's going by all the time. It's very loud. And then eventually you stop even noticing it because you habituate to it. So the question is, do cats habituate to the same toy? And I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, my cat's like not interested in any of the toys anymore. He's bored of play. Comes up a lot. So in this case, Sarah Hall and John Bradshaw proved that yes, in fact, cats do get bored of the same toy. So how they did this was they presented a cat with the same toy 3 times in a row. So they had 3 sessions where the cat was exposed to the toy for 5 minutes. And then in between the sessions, they would have a pause of anywhere from 5, 15, 25, or 45 minutes. Then on the 4th trial, they would present the cat with a new identical toy. So the toy looked very much like the first one. It was the same materials. It was just brand new. And so what we can see, so I'm going to walk through these graphs. They all show basically the same thing. So we'll start with the upper left-hand corner graph. So we've got the session number. So we've got session 1. They don't show the data for session 2, but basically then we have session 3, which is the 3rd presentation of the same toy. And then on session 4, there's a new toy presented. So in this case, we have kill bites are the little triangles and clutches are these little squares. So we see the cats on the first presentation of a toy are interacting with it quite a bit. So they're biting it quite a lot and clutching it a lot. But by session 3, their response has decreased significantly. So they're not really biting it very much and they're barely clutching it at all. When the new toy is presented on trial 4, the interest in the toy is close to the original interest. So we see an increase in biting, an increase in clutching. And what this tells us is that when cats are losing interest in play, it may be actually that they're losing interest in that specific toy. And so one thing I always recommend to people is rotate through a few toys during a play session. Like, don't be afraid to switch out the toys. And of course, you should have a nice rotation of toys in your collection so that you're not always playing with the same toy with a cat. What I find is a lot of clients, they have one toy for their cat and they only use that one toy. And yes, the cat is bored of that toy. Okay, and I like to tie all of this into welfare. And, I think a lot of us are very familiar with the 5 freedoms, which is one of the first kind of models about animal welfare that was developed primarily for farm animals. And that was a model specifically about what experiences animals should be free from, right? So freedom from pain, freedom from hunger, freedom from thirst. And it really focused on the avoidance of aversive experiences. And so in 2016, DJ Meller proposed the 5 provisions, which is really about not what we should avoid, but also what we should provide, right? So it's not just freedom from hunger, but actually provision of good nutrition, not just freedom from pain, but provision of good health, the ability to express species typical behaviors. Now, related to cats, even a few years before that model, the AFP and International Society for Feline Medicine provided the Feline Environmental Needs Guidelines, which provided these 5 pillars of a healthy feline environment. And whenever I'm like thinking about what do cats need, I go back to these 5 pillars, which are listed here. And I'm just highlighting my favorite one, which is, of course, opportunities for play and predatory behavior, because again, this is a species typical natural behavior for cats, and they benefit from having an outlet for it. I also always like to impress upon people that, we know that cats need food, water, litter box, of that check, but the other things in the environment are not optional. So I really try to, again, think about language. I try to avoid terms like enrichment and really focus on environmental necessities. So just like cats need food, water, and a clean litter box, they need things to do. They need places to climb. They need things to scratch. They need places to hide, because the goal is to prevent behavior problems and be proactive rather than reactive. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, they already have a behavior problem that could have been prevented with some environmental changes earlier on in the cat's life. And now that the behavior problem has been well established, we have to go through the challenge of making those changes after the fact. And so it's always much better to prevent behavior problems than solve them. Okay, do cats need play? I think some people think, well, my cat's perfectly happy. He doesn't really want to play. I don't want to play with him. What's the problem? And maybe there isn't a problem. You could argue that cats are naturally energy conservers, right? So they spend a lot of time sleeping. So they're not necessarily bouncing off the walls all day. Why do I need to play with them? And I will not say there's no like proof that just because a cat doesn't play automatically means that they have poor welfare. Of course, you can do lots of other things to cats to provide them with good welfare. That said, there's lots of evidence that exercise provides cognitive and physical benefits across many species. We think that exercise has anxiolytic or anxiety reducing effects for many of us, including some conservation across other mammalian species. And we do see from research that when cats are in stressful conditions, including being in shelters or being declawed, that they do play less. So from this, we can kind of infer that when cats are stressed, they're playing less. Thus, there's kind of a relationship that may exist between play and welfare. And probably most importantly, there's very little harm to trying to play with your cat. So the main issue is when the play goes awry, right? And so when I'm presented with a case that looks like play aggression, of course, not everybody knows why their cat is engaging in this behavior. So often my clients are just saying, my cat is attacking me. So when I'm working with a client, the first thing is that they're going to fill out my intake form, where I'm going to get a history on the cat, the owner's description of the behavior in their own terms, what they've been doing to try to address the behavior, some questions about the environment. Of course, has the cat been seen by a veterinarian? Because when I have a cat presenting with any type of biting and scratching, I much prefer that the cat is healthy and has had a clearance of good health from a veterinarian. But then often I have a lot of questions. So my intake form is pretty simple, and I often, during the conversation I have with my clients, I'm going to ask a lot more specific behaviors, such as questions such as, when is the behavior happening? Where is it happening? Who is it happening to? What's happening just before and after? Because especially I think with the misdirected predatory aggression or behaviors that we can see, again, a lot of those stalking behaviors. I want to know, is the cat vocalizing or is the cat silent? What does the cat do immediately after they've bitten or scratched the human? I like to have videos to assess, but one caveat is that I typically do not want people to recreate scenarios. So if they happen to have captured video of the cat's behavior, that's one thing, but I don't want them to try to provoke their cat to bite them just so I can see their cat biting them. Like, I can envision what's probably happening and why based on other information. So I definitely do never ask people to recreate or set up a scenario where they're likely to get injured just so I can see the cat's behavior. But sometimes people just happen to have some videos, as you'll see. And of course, I always want to see the environment. So I primarily operate remotely because I'm helping a lot of clients out of my immediate area. So as part of my intake, I do ask people to provide me with a walkthrough of their home through video. So I want to see all the cat stuff, basically. So I want to see where the litter boxes are. I want to see if they have a scratching post. I want to see if they have vertical space. I want to see if there's toys everywhere. Is this a very sparse environment, or is there clutter everywhere? Do they have enough resources for the number of the cats in the home? So these kinds of things can be really helpful to kind of get a sense of whether or not this cat lives in an environment that is stimulating enough for them. Because again, assuming that this is a play aggressive cat, they do tend to need a lot of stimulation. What we tend to see, and of course there are exceptions, so I'm never going to say like all play aggressive cats do or X, Y, and Z, but the cats are typically young and very active. So they tend to be very smart and often get into trouble in other ways, knocking things off shelves or doing things for attention. But at this stage, what I'm trying to do is really classify their behavior. And so I want to know if the attacks are silent, because playful behavior does tend to be silent. Again, predation tends to be silent. So a cat who's hissing and growling when they're biting and scratching their human is much less likely to be play aggressive than if they're attacking with very few vocalizations or no vocalizations at all. Again, biting, scratching, and kicking of moving body parts, legs, feet, hands is very common. And we will see some kind of hiding. And what I mean by that is kind of ambushing, where the cat's waiting around the corner for a person, stalking them, chasing them, that sort of behavior. So this is my cat Coriander. She has she's got a touch of the play aggression. And so I don't have like a full video of her stalking me, but once she has kind of, so her progression of behavior, which tends to happen also when she's hungry. So there's kind of a relationship, but is that she'll follow quickly, often rub a couple times, and flop over, and then start grabbing, biting, bunny kicking, a lot of bunny kicking with her back legs. I don't respond to her behavior at all because I don't want to excite her further. I don't want her to bite me harder than she already is. She can she can scratch pretty hard and bite pretty hard. So so you'll see I'm not saying anything to her or moving at all. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, the complication of this type of aggression is that often it's encouraged by some members of the household. So it's really important to get everybody kind of on the same page about how they're interacting with the cat. And there's also some normalization of biting and scratching. So, you know, I would say that you often have like one person in the household who's just like, it's fine, it's doing what cats do. And then someone else who's got bites and scratches all over them who's like, I can't live like this. So so it is always interesting to kind of see how people feel about it. Some people really are afraid of their cats at the point that they call me, and other people are very indifferent and almost, you know, like engaging with their cat in this way. And unfortunately, this type of aggression can be reinforced by the owner's response. So even things that the owner thinks might be a deterrent, like screaming or having a huge physical reaction, often excite the cat because, again, the cat is in a predatory state. The human is acting like prey. They're trying to get away, and that is going to possibly encourage the cat to bite harder. Probably the most complicated part of this is just that there's a lot of overlap with other forms of aggression. And this is a cat who, as you'll see, so one of the things I ask for when people are working with me is to send a video of them petting their cat. And so this is one of my clients with her cat.
Dr. Delgado, the playback is just a little bit choppy, but we
Hmm.
can see it. We'll fix it
Okay.
for the recording.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So basically what the video was showing was, you know, the person was showing me how they pet their cat. They were maybe missing some signals from the cat that he was not comfortable with the approach, primarily of her hand over his face. And at the end, he does swat her. And she says this is what he does. So this cat is clearly not comfortable with all of the ways that the human interacts with him, and he may be overstimulating. And so again, we see that sometimes there's more than one behavior issue going on. So it's not just that the cat is play aggressive, but the cat is also maybe sensitive to how they're being handled, even when the handling is like positive, like petting and stroking the cat. So then what can also happen is that if people do start doing things like using punishment or provoking biting from the cat, either in a playful way or just because they're overhandling the cat, then the behavior can become a little more emotionally complex because now it's not just this desire seeking, remember the pursuit of resources in the environment and hunting, but now it's got elements of fear and frustration in it. And that can be a much more serious problem that's going to be harder to solve because now the cat has some negative feelings about the human that they're interacting with that we want them to have a nice bond with. Okay, so again, I mentioned young cats tend to be at risk. So we do see that the only cat in the home. So there are a few papers showing that cats who are the only cat in the home are more prone to biting and scratching their owners. There's some research about orphaned and early weaned kittens suggesting that they have more aggression issues. What I would say is that there's some caveats to that research because it's primarily survey based and reliant on the person knowing a lot about the history of their individual cat. And I think that knowledge is not always there. Indoor only cats may be at risk because of boredom, lack of stimulation. Again, a history of inconsistent handling. So maybe people who thought it was fun to play with the kitten with their hands when they were small, but now does not appreciate that behavior so much now that the cat is 13 pounds. And again, lack of playtime or lack of stimulation in the environment are all things I would consider risk factors. And these are all things that I would explore with an owner is just what their routine is as far as playing with the cat and what kind of mental stimulation the cat's provided with and how they handle the cat. Here's another, here's another case. This couple was about to have a baby and their cat was very needy for attention. So this is another behavior that can kind of overlap with play aggression, which is like kind of intense attention seeking behavior. And hopefully you can see this video. So he was, he wanted to be handled, but also would get overstimulated and bite. And then you'll see he's going to solicit attention and jump on the human again because he wants to be held, but then he's biting her. She puts him down, and then as she walks away, you'll see he chases her, kind of tags her back leg. So this is a pretty common presentation for this cat. He actually, and so after they had the baby, they also had concerns because here he is with the baby, and he's a very sweet cat. He was very people oriented and really enjoyed being near his people, and was remarkably like not disturbed by the baby at all. Doing a lot of like affiliative behavior, lots of rubbing, and also a little bit of playing with the baby's feet. So the owners didn't love that. So we had to work on that. And he responded really well to a combination of increased play, clicker training, some environmental enrichment. We did some changes around the baby's environment so he couldn't access those baby feet. And he was also put on Prozac, which combined that kept him in his home and kept his humans happy and with a good relationship with the baby. Now, sometimes, so that's again, who's the victim here? In this case, it was the adults, but it was also the baby was being subjected to a little bit of that playful style aggression. Sometimes we see this also in a multi-cat household where we have a mismatch. We have a young active cat and maybe we have an older, less active cat who does not want to play. And so hopefully you can see this gray cat is chasing the larger orange and white cat. Who was quite a bit older and did not want to interact with the younger cat in this kind of way. I mean, the younger cat, his tail's up. He's obviously wanting to probably roughhouse. He's completely ignoring the distancing behaviors of the larger cat and saying, no, I still want to jump on you. I still would like you to wrestle with me. So this was causing a lot of stress for the older cat because he did not really want to engage with another cat this way. He'd recently lost a kitty companion, so who was also quite a bit older. So to have this youngster coming into his space, wanting to basically violate his personal space bubble at any given opportunity was leading to some litter box problems, and there was ongoing interactions like this, like that. And of course, when he runs away, the smaller cat chases him. So it's kind of the cat's behavior is also not helping the situation because he's also acting in a prey-like manner. We can see some stalking happening. And this poor older cat cannot get away. He's like, please just leave me alone. And this comes up a lot in multi-cat households. People want to know, are my cats fighting or are they playing? And so typically the signs are, play can be rough, but it's inhibited. So we're not going to see injuries. Play is mutual, and that's really important that the cats are taking turns being the chaser or the instigator of the play. Play tends to be silent or quiet, so we don't hear a lot of growling and hissing. When cats are playing, they tend to be distractible. We don't want to see injuries. And probably most importantly is that we want to see other positive behaviors between the cats. So we want to see tails up, we want to see nose touching, we want to see rubbing, we want to see sleeping together. And if the cats are not otherwise showing signs of friendship, then they may be fighting. Now, the other complicating factor is that, as in that previous example, one cat may be playing and the other cat does not feel like it's play. So it can be very one-sided as well. So it's not like they always agree. And then we see things like boredom, frustration, hunger, just like with the play and hunting. I think that hunger increases playful aggression. We can see cats that also have like compulsive behaviors or attention seeking. Maybe they've learned to get attention from their humans by doing behaviors that the humans don't appreciate, like this kitty. Who is very aware that her human is talking to her, probably is loving both the excitement of the picture moving and the fact that she has her human's undirected attention. Okay, and so a lot of these behaviors can be learned or the cat has learned to do things for attention, essentially. And, some people would say that some of these cats have some form of impulse control where maybe their bites are not inhibited, and so that is contributing. So again, we can kind of have this more complex picture of what's going on with the cat. And here's an example of a cat who's play aggressive, but also has some issues with chewing on items in the household that cats should not be chewing. So in this case, I'm also looking at the attention-seeking component because as humans, we're very quick to react to this behavior, but also the fact that this cat is probably either stressed or very understimulated, or stressed because they're understimulated. Okay. Hopefully you can see that video. The cat is chewing on the side of the stove. Okay, so how do we get from, again, here's my cat Coriander. How do we get from the, very dilated pupils, feeling a little like biting something, to sleeping and relaxing? So I always start with an environmental check. So I want to make sure that the cat has all of those essential needs met as far as vertical space, safe spaces, enrichment, sensory stimulation, enough resources for the number of cats, and ideally safe outdoor access if it's appropriate for that cat in that home. So this is my catio. A lot of cats need more playtime. So this was a client who, they were very sweet. They really loved this cat, but they didn't understand why she was biting them every time they tried to pet her. She was just very playful. They were letting herself play. So she was engaging in a lot of play by herself, but she wasn't getting a lot of interaction with toys in the environment, or, toys that her human was moving. So she just needed more exercise and opportunities to hunt rather than just relying on her playing by herself. And I think a lot of people think, like, when they have a young cat, like, oh, well, he just keeps himself entertained, so we don't have to do much. Like, she obviously does entertain herself, but it was not nearly enough for her to keep her from biting and scratching the people in the home. So increased playtime is often a recommendation, almost always. When it comes to how to play, I don't have time to go over the details of how to play, but I did write a book that came out earlier this year about playing with cats that really gives a lot of how-tos and how to pick a toy, how to move the toy, when to play, what to do if you have multiple cats in the home, what to do in shelters, what to do if your cat has a disability. And I also have this free handout that I did with Lily Chin. So if you're not familiar with her work, she's an amazing illustrator. She also illustrated my book. Which you can download this handout for free from my website, which is whatyourcatwants.com. And the handout has been translated into, I think, 13 languages now. So I encourage people to get that handout, distribute it freely, enjoy it, share it, etc. Okay, and just some quick tips for play. Use all your cat's senses, follow the stalk, rush, kill sequence. So we're trying to really mimic that hunting experience. So that means acting like play. Rotate toys. So again, making sure your cats aren't getting bored. Cool down the play at the end so the cat isn't left really overexcited. And sometimes that means kind of moving the toy more slowly, killing the toy, and then taking it away and maybe giving your cat a treat or a snack or a food puzzle so that they have kind of that full hunting sequence of behaviors, including consumption. And if you have multiple cats, you're probably going to need to separate them to really play with all of them appropriately. I use a lot of diversion with play aggression. So this is something I did with my own cat. I say always be tossing. So I was basically just always had, I had pajamas with pockets, and I would always have little mice or pom-poms or ping pong balls or whatever in my pockets. And so I got in the habit of, when I walk around the house, I was tossing toys and treats away from my body so that my cat would learn that when I'm moving around the house, she should actually move away from me. She should, because there's lots of really exciting things happening. And how I knew that her behavior was play aggression and not just like hunger or frustration is that she would 99% of the time chase these toys. So she was very motivated and easily distracted away from my body as long as she had something else to chase. You could also do this with like a wand toy you could carry around, because it gives a lot of distance between your body and the lure that they're chasing. So these are good ways to keep a cat, allow you to move through your house safely while keeping the cat away from your body. I also am a big fan of training for alternative behaviors. So this is Coriander sitting at dinner time. This was a big problem time for her because she would chase the other cats in my house. So instead, I trained her to sit by me while I eat dinner, and I toss her treats occasionally, which she goes and chases and comes back. So I get both some activity out of her when she chases the treats, but she does always come back and station with me. So it's also good at kind of regulating her emotional state. Like she gets from excited chasing the treat to coming and sitting calmly for varying amounts of time. So I'm tossing these treats at kind of a variable reinforcement schedule. So she doesn't know exactly when the next treat's coming. So training is always good for attention-seeking cats. So I like using training like sit and targeting as a foundation for so many other behaviors. I like training cats to settle and relax. So these are all things that can have a positive effect because we're just training something that they can attack your leg and sit and relax on their mat at the same time. Highly recommend catschool.co if you are interested in learning more about training cats. These cats need lots of cognitive challenges and enrichment. So looking at various ways we can provide our cats with mental stimulation, from food puzzles to harness training to bird feeders to watch to sensory enrichment, and a fish tank if you can treat the fish nicely. Handling. So as I hinted at earlier, sometimes people are very hands-on with their cats in general, and like that one cat who got overstimulated, that can be problematic. And this homunculus shows like where humans are most sensitive, our hands and our lips. So we want to hug and kiss cats a lot. But cats are high frequency, low intensity contact species, meaning that if you look at how they interact with cats they're friendly with, they're doing a lot of very quick drive-bys. So they're not doing long petting sessions, and in fact, when they groom each other, you'll often see that it ends in a little tiff, even if the cats are friendly. So they prefer more frequent, but much lower intensity and much shorter interactions. And cats always need a sense of choice and control when they're handled. So I think this is where a lot of people don't really recognize when their cat is stressed by the way they're handling them, or even if their cat wants to be handled. And I'm a big fan of asking cats if they would like to be petted. You can train them very easily if you offer them a finger and they nose touch it or rub into your finger, that you give them one pet. And if they do not nose touch or rub into your finger, they do not get a pet. And most cats will pick this up pretty quickly. I do this with Coriander, and sometimes she clearly tells me she does not want to be petted, and I respect that, even though it hurts my feelings a little. And a big thing is that I see a lot of people with young cats, they want to pet the cats when the cat clearly wants to play. And so they're petting the cat and the cat immediately rolls over and starts like kicking their arm. And it's like, yeah, the cat does not want petting right now. So this is a big one because, we want to pet the cats, and really, I think people have a hard time kind of setting aside their own desires to respect what their cat wants in the moment. Should you get another cat? Not a fail-safe. I mean, I've got 3 cats, they're sisters, and Coriander still has some issues. So obviously it's not a guarantee. And not every person has the time, resources, or interest in bringing in another cat, going through the introduction process, which can be disastrous in some cases. And there's no guarantee that a new cat wants the play aggressive cat to, they don't want to be their punching bag, right? So it's not necessarily the best solution. I do recommend, if you're going to get a kitten, it's nice to get 2. They will grow up together, and research shows that they're more likely to be friends later in life than cats are introduced as adults. But it's not necessarily just a cure-all, especially if the cat is already an adult. Medication. So I often do work with veterinarians on some of my cases, and of course encourage the owners to discuss medication with their veterinarians, especially if the bites and scratches are uninhibited. The cat is at risk of losing their home or getting serious injuries. We're not getting the response we want from behavior modification. And there are lots of options. Some veterinarians are very comfortable prescribing medication, but in other cases, they may want to do a consultation with a veterinary behaviorist. And a lot of veterinary behaviorists are offering vet-to-vet consultations. And then you have to just make sure the cat can be safely medicated by the human. And that's beyond the scope of this talk, but there's lots of fear-free methods that we can use to make medication easier for our cats. What I don't recommend is rough play, including chase games or wrestling. Probably not a surprise to you. I don't recommend any type of punishment. Spray bottles are a no. They're for misting plants, not changing behavior. I don't typically recommend locking up a cat in a crate. People do this all the time for this kind of behavior. As I mentioned, having a huge physical reaction can actually increase the aggression. So I always try to encourage people to minimize their reaction. If that means they need to wear more clothing in the home while they're working on this behavior, so be it. Okay, so my takeaways are really play and predation are natural cat behaviors, but some cats are at higher risk of what we might call problematic play behavior. and that behavior modification for this behavior requires a multifaceted approach. There's not a one size fits all, and certainly I'm not going to overwhelm every single client with every single thing I just listed. So I really have to tailor it to the individual client and household and cat. But that's kind of the laundry list that I start with and work from there. So that is my talk. There's Coriander again. And here's some ways to find me online or reach out to me. And I'm happy to answer a few questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Delgado. That was a wonderful presentation. Let's go ahead and jump into, we have a lot of questions, so we'll see how many we can get to. I am going to stop sharing your screen so that they can
Okay.
see us a little better. Okay, there we go. So our first question is, so how do we address modifying play aggression in a shelter setting? Do we just provide as much mental and physical enrichment as possible?
Yeah, so when I worked at the San Francisco SPCA, we had quite a few cats that fit this this label, and sometimes it was just frustration of being in a cage. So if you can move those cats to a larger space where they have the opportunity to exercise more and have different types of interactions with people, then that is great. Foster homes can be great. So sometimes it is just trying to make sure that the cat's environment is sufficient for them, understanding, of course, that every shelter has different opportunities and limitations. So it could be that you need to actually specify how your volunteers or public are interacting with that cat to minimize the risk of making this behavior worse. So, people would come into the shelter all the time and start wiggling their fingers in cages. So you have to be able to communicate with people nicely. You don't want to, you always have to be, when you're correcting someone's behavior, you want to do so in a way that's not going to just shut them down and make them not want to deal with you. So sometimes we're proactive in giving everybody an interactive wand toy and saying, oh, can you use this with the kittens? And of course, modeling good behavior. So sometimes it is like a combo of okay, this cat only, bring a toy with you and don't pet him until he's tired and, showing X signs versus maybe, again, you're trying to move the cat to a place where they can just freely engage. But all of these things I think you can do if you have the right resources and the right training for your volunteers, or if you have a subset of volunteers who are specifically trained to work with cats who bite and scratch. But I'm always a fan of just full disclosure and making sure that people know what they're getting into when they're either visiting or adopting a cat, and also helping them understand what to do. Just like, we know positive reinforcement works when we're changing animal behavior, we want to try to apply those principles to the adopters and the volunteers as well. So yeah, I wouldn't change too much, except, probably less petting, more enrichment. We had a few cats too that we would take for harness walks in the hallways of the shelter when they were really kind of pent up and needed a little outlet for that. Tired cats are happy cats, right? Just like with dogs.
Thank you. One little add-on to that question. How often do you use foster care as an option for these cats with misdirected predatory behavior? And does it help, or how often is that behavior consistent from shelter to home?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we'd never, since I'm not in the shelter environment right now, I don't have any data, and we did follow up with the cats who were maybe most at risk in the shelter. So we did try to contact their adopters later. And a lot of adopters would say yeah, he's not doing that here. So, some things are probably exacerbated by the stress of being in the shelter and, again, confined spaces. But it's always a mix, because some people would say, yep, he's still biting us. So it's I would say the likelihood of improvement in the home is high. But I would also want to look at how it, again, are the bites inhibited? Is this cat distractible, or is the cat pretty intense in their behavior and maybe not as easy to distract? So I don't have a great answer, except that most of them get better in the home because they have more space to run around. But I wouldn't just send them home without kind of explaining to the person, you need to play with them like this and not play with them like that. And you need to pet them not very much and maybe do some training, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Our next question was about the Hall Bradshaw 1998 object play hunger study.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, in terms of small versus large rodents, is it like the difference between a squirrel and a chipmunk? What was the size difference in that study?
I think the toys were like, an inch versus like 3 inches. So it wasn't like, no, not squirrels. I think more like mice and rats would probably be the closest parallel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question is, do you find indoor only cats are more prone to frustration or aggression?
I mean, it's hard to say. I definitely have clients with cats. Some of the cats in the home can go outside and other cats choose not to. So I don't think we can say, oh, there's a one size fits all, because it really depends on the environment. Like, you can do a lot of great things inside that will definitely decrease the chance that your cat's going to have behavior problems, and is going to increase the chance that your cat has really great welfare. Um, I definitely see problems with some cats who have outdoor access that are getting in fights with other cats in the neighborhood, and then coming in and getting in fights with everybody in the home, whether it's, cats or humans. So going outside is not like a cure-all for problems. Um, I think you do have to kind of address it on a case-by-case level and really assess what's going on in the environment, the human's routine, the cat's routine, like when is the cat active, when are there humans around. I think a lot of things changed when people started working from home more, because there's so many more interactions with cats, that people are observing their cats more and maybe seeing more things that concern them. So I always try to kind of weigh all these factors, but I don't think the answer is to open the door, because I'm not a fan of free roaming cats. But some cats do great with harness training, or my cats have a catio and they do spend a lot of time in it. And I will say that when my last cat, I started taking her out on a harness when she was about 14, 15. So she'd been indoors only her whole life. And if you'd asked me, was she perfectly happy, I would have said yes. But when I started taking her outside, wow, she loved it. And it really made me reconsider, like, the cat should be indoors only, and really expand, like, okay, we should provide cats with safe, controlled outdoor access, because even though she was just laying in the dirt, rolling around, I could tell it was qualitatively different than just sitting in front of like an open screen door. Like, the full outdoor experience was different for her. That said, like I said, I've had plenty of clients who have like one cat in the house goes outside and the other cat has zero interest. So I think it can be good for cats to have that outdoor access, but it's not necessarily going to fix problems, and it may not be necessary for all kitties.
Thank you. Great answer. We are getting close to the top of the hour. Dr. Delgado, are you able to answer a couple more?
I can handle another couple questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question should be probably a quick one. Can you share an example of your intake form?
Not off the top of I mean, it's like a list of, so I've gone through many iterations as a consultant of the intake form. And if you look online, like a lot of consultants will have their intake forms online. I started off, it was like 8 pages of like questions and check boxes. And I really simplified it, because I tend to, after I get the intake form, then I know exactly what follow-up questions I want to ask, rather than asking like every single thing about the cat before I even have taken on the client. So I don't want the client to invest a ton of time, because I do refer out a lot of cats to veterinary behaviorists if I think they would benefit from medication, or there's like some serious medical issues that I'm going to make them go to their veterinarian first. So I want to minimize the amount of time people spend filling out the form. So I ask about basically every cat in the home, where they were obtained, are they spayed, neutered? I want to know who is in the home or visits frequently, as far as the ages and people coming in and out. I want to know the client's description of the behavior, what they've done to try to resolve it, how long has it been going on, describe the most recent incident. I want to know, has the cat been seen by a veterinarian? I want permission to see to contact their veterinarian if necessary. So it's pretty straightforward. I can probably find something I can upload, but some people have like lots of checklists, like they want to know all about the litter box and all about like the square footage of the house. I tend to ask a lot of questions during the session, as far as like going through the routine, and I'm going to ask them for the video walkthrough of the house. So during that process, I'm going to learn kind of how many litter boxes they have, and what kind of litter boxes they have, and what kind of litter they use, and if they have a cat tree. So like I said, it really depends on what information you want and what you find helpful. And I've just found the shorter is a little bit more efficient for me.
That's what works for me too. Glad we agree on that. So,
Yes.
next question is one that we have a lot of upvotes on, and that is a shelter rescue related question. Does it seem ethical for cats who consistently display play aggression, even with consistent outlets, to then consider them as working cats to then live as outdoor cats? Or would it be a better, or is a better alternative to allow an indoor outdoor option for these cats, or something else that you would recommend?
Um, yeah, that's a complex question because it gets into a lot of like, which cats should be placed outside? What is that outdoor environment? What kind of care does this cat have on an ongoing basis? We certainly did, when I was at the San Francisco SPCA, place some cats who had uh, play aggressive behaviors, probably other behaviors as well that were a little more serious. We placed some of them on farms, but where we kind of knew they would have limited um, they would have some human contact, but not a lot because they were living in a fairly remote location versus just having the cat live in a neighborhood where they're going outside. What is the risk that they are going to bite and scratch other people? So you kind of have to weigh all of these things. So I don't think there's a one size fits all because it really, I think a lot of these cats can be perfectly fine pets. Like I help. This is to me when I get a play aggressive cat as a consultant. I'm so happy. Like those are like my easiest consults. Like you can get really good results. Whereas like cats fighting is like, oh, this is gonna take months. So like from the consultant perspective, I love me a young active cat who's pouncing on people's legs because these are behaviors that can be modified. So I would hate to condemn a cat if they were otherwise friendly, social, um, and treatable to living outside if there were other options because there might be another cat who really does need that outdoor space more. So it really depends on your capacity, your philosophy about placing cats outdoors. No easy answers to any of these questions, but I think it's always good to have a team of people discussing them and discussing the pros and cons of these so that it's not or having policies, it's tricky.
It's so tricky. Thank you. Next question is, I have to wonder if people who allowed kittens to play slash attack hands and feet when young are more likely to escalate when older.
We assume that's the case, but I don't know of any research about this topic. So we're making a lot of assumptions, but you could assume that there's some reinforcement and learning history going on there that is teaching the cat that these are acceptable behaviors and that they're not just going to one day be like, oh, I'm grown up now, I'm not going to do that anymore. So I do encourage people to be really careful in how they handle their cats as kittens. And of course, as I've alluded to a lot, I think in general people just overhandle their cats. Not that there aren't cats that love being petted a lot, but I do see again in the videos where I ask my clients to send me a video of themselves petting their cat, I do see a lot of overstimulation and overhandling.
Thank you. Next is it better to determine whether the cat prefers airborne toys versus ground drag toys, or best to mix it up no matter what the preference?
Yeah, so if we look at cats' hunting behaviors, we have some cats who are specialists where they seem to really have a strong prey preference. And then we have other cats who are clear generalists where anything that moves is fair game. But I always encourage people to try different things just because even if you're a specialist, you're a cat and you hunt, if you kill all the frogs in your area, you can't switch to a different prey animal, you will die, right? So there's probably some tendency in cats to be able to switch between prey just because the prey predator dynamics, we know in other species that they can really affect the population of both species when you have high predation. So I think there has to be some level of flexibility. So I always encourage people to try different toys, different types of movements. I talk about this a lot in my book. So your cat may have some strong feather preferences, but it always is nice to bust out a little, mouse-like toy or a little lizard-like toy and see how they respond.
Great, thank you. Next is, what would you suggest for a cat that bites when attention is withdrawn?
Yeah, so this gets back to the I think training for other behaviors and also training as kind of thinking of it as building skills for the cat where you're actually maybe increasing the time they have to wait for reinforcement or the amount of time they have to settle on their mat, right? So I'm trying to build a little bit of what some might call resilience or patience in that cat. So I find that we can use training. I mean, I think it's always good to give the cat other things to do. So if they're too focused on humans or they don't have other forms of enrichment, then they are going to seek out the person's attention as their primary source of entertainment. So I always encourage people to think like, okay, your Google Calendar, like what's in your day? We have meetings. I got to run some errands and then I have another meeting and then I got to do this work task. For your cat, if their entire calendar is just pestering my human to give me attention because they don't have other things to do, they don't have a food puzzle to solve, they don't have a bird feeder to watch, they don't have toys to play with, they don't have playtime on their schedule, then we are kind of encouraging them to focus on humans as their main source of entertainment. And I think that although we want, of course, our cats to have a bond with us and to interact with us, that we run the risk of making them too dependent on us. And that can lead to things like anxiety when we're gone and can also lead to these kind of frustration behaviors when they don't get our attention when they want it every second of the day. And again, I think a lot of us working from home has exacerbated some of these types of problems.
Great. Next question. Is there any correlation between indoor only versus outside access cats or male versus female in play aggression?
I don't know of any research showing that. I've definitely had cases of all of the above.
Thank you. All right. And it looks like this will be the last one we have time for today. And that is, I don't like the feathers on toys. Am I being overly cautious or should they be removed if the cat starts to eat them?
Hmm. Well, not liking the feathers versus your cat's eating the feathers are two separate things, right? So if your cat's eating the toys, then you do have to kind of explore whether or not you have a pica situation where the cat is ingesting things they shouldn't. Now, of course, you could argue, well, cats would eat feathers if they're killing a bird. So maybe the feather, like a little bit of feather may or may not be a problem. But I also do not like when cats have GI uh, blockage. That can be a very expensive surgery. So if your cat is biting and chewing and actually ingesting parts of toys, you should try other toys. But most cats, I think, don't have those problems. So I don't want to give a one size fits all answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Delgado. This was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for
And
having
thanks to
me.
all of you for watching today's webcast. Any questions?